Hi guys, thank you for coming to How Film Directors and Previs Artists Work Together in Pre-Production. Put your hands together to welcome Jack Geckler and Larry Katz.
What's up, you guys? Good afternoon. So excited. Oh, someone's excited. You shouldn't put that there. It's distracting. So raise your hand if you're film students in here. Raise your hand if you're computer animation students.
All right, all right.
What else? Who else? Digital design? Graphic design.
Graphic design.
Cool. Any
recording arts in here?
Music production?
There we go. All right.
Entertainment business? Did we miss anybody? Game development.
Nice, game
cool.
development.
Oh yeah, there's some crossover there for sure. Right, Jeremy? Where's Jeremy Vickery? He can tell you back there. Cool. Well, thanks for coming, guys. You know, Jack and I met several years ago when he got into the Hall of Fame, and we hit it off. And it's cool that we found some overlap, even though we've not specifically worked with each other. Yeah. We found some overlap in our Venn diagrams of our careers. And before we even get into the technical part, one thing that I recognize meeting Jack is that we both have a similar outlook on our careers. And that's as far as our skills. You know, the skills come with experience. They come with training. And that part's important. But, I think Jack will tell you that attitude is what keeps our phone ringing, 100%. I have like a certain skill set, but the skills of my job are actually not that hard. It's really more about stamina and maintaining like a good attitude all day long. That's why my phone keeps ringing. And so I love the story about how, you got hired on your first kind of like big gig. So just share that.
Yeah, I mean, like Larry said, I end up having to do sometimes a little more technical stuff than Larry does on the computer. But honestly, I can do that, and a lot of us can do that. I found that my strength is what Larry said. Like a lot of my strength came in personality, and in my industry, I found that was just huge. And I hadn't really thought about it prior to that. I just this is just me. But a lot of artists are introverts, so I kind of used it to my advantage. And I got invited. I was trying to get my first film job, and I got invited by a buddy of mine who was at a studio. He said, "Hey, the studio is going to play paintball, and you should really come with us." I'm like, I don't want to get shot by your coworkers. Why do you want me to go play paintball? He's like, no, just come hang out and just be you, man. I said, okay. So I went out there, and I had that gung-ho spirit, not knowing better, so I'm like shooting producers in the head, and like one of the visual effects supervisors, like I'm running up on a gun, yelling at like surrender. But I had such a good time, and I had a blast with these guys, and I leave the paintball thing, and my buddy hits me up. He said, "Dude, these guys love you." And the one was an animation supervisor on the film they were working on, and he contacted me directly. He said, "Hey, we have this spot. Let me see some of your work." And it opened this dialogue, and then the next thing I know, I'm interviewing, and the next thing I know, I'm working on Disney's Sky High as my first film. And that actually was that launched me also into kind of my first taste of Previs was on that film. And I didn't know what that was at the time, but the director of the film is a guy named Mike Mitchell. He's directed Shrek 4. He's directed a lot of stuff. He's a great guy. But he also, turns out, was a Cal Arts animator at one point, too. And he had this idea. He's like, look, we have this school bus that's going to transform to take the kids up to this spaceship. And we had no images. And he's trying to explain it to me. I'm like, all right, a school bus. And he's like, and I don't know what it looks like. So, yeah. I was like, oh, I need to tell you what it looks like? And that was my first taste of like having to basically create a sequence from very, very slim notes and no real dialogue cues because they don't talk during that sequence, but really getting to be like, oh my God, this is awesome. I can create this whole sequence out of this and then pitch it to him, which then turned into final animation for me on the back end. It was amazing, man.
I want to get into the meat of this, but I really admire Jack's attitude, and it's something that I preach to all my students all the time. So, I want to, and again, sometimes you don't feel extroverted, or sometimes you don't feel like you're in a good mood, but you got to like recognize the way that people receive you is really important to your career
it's
trajectory.
Everything.
So, and it came up in my last session. Sometimes I'll work really hard on creating a movie schedule. And I might sequester myself and make all the pieces fit 8 hours. And finally, all the pieces fit together, and I'm going to present it to the director. And they say, oh, that's great, but what if Tom Cruise doesn't work on Wednesday? And what if we switch the church to Thursday? And so now I just painstakingly worked on this. And this individual is asking me to just blow it up. And so at that moment, I'm thinking, you dick. Man, no, I don't want to do that. No, we can't put Tom on Wednesday. It worked so hard to put this together. That's what's going through my head. But my job is to say, let me look into that. And so now I have to disseminate that information to other people on the crew who I just told, this is the schedule. And now I have to tell them, everything I just told you is changed. You've been on the phone for the last 4 hours lining up what that schedule was. Here's the new plan. And this is the new plan. And I see it. People, oh no, I worked so hard. And they got to tell me how hard it's going to be now to make this adjustment. And I know they're going to do it anyway. And then they're going to come back and say, wow, it was so hard, but look, I did it. And it's just a lot of like negativity and nonsense that doesn't have to happen. So part of your job, I think, when we get notes like that and blow up the whole thing that we've been working on, you got to understand your job is to say, copy that, let me work on that, and I'll get back to you. And it's a conscious attitude adjustment.
No, it is. And to add to that, like in my industry, on our side, we work on shots and sequences for these movies. And there's a thing called being ooped out of a movie, out of picture. Ooped. And what that is you might be on a sequence for a couple weeks and you put your heart into it and it's gone up the pipeline. The director's been like, that looks amazing. And then it hits the editing room floor. And then it goes to a screening. And then the next week they're like, oh yeah, PSs aren't in the movie anymore. What? and it hits you. You're like, that happened on Deadpool 2. I did all this creative stuff on the Previs side for some ideas the director wanted to try out. And I did some cool stuff. I think some of the stuff I told you about. And then I get to the movie, and on the previous phase, you don't always see the end result up front. And I'm watching the movie, and I keep waiting for the scene and waiting for the scene and waiting for the scene. Oh. But at the end of the day, I take a step back, and I like, who's going to cry for me? I just worked on this movie. So it's how you handle those moments too, right?
Right.
Or in those moments, like you said, like keep that inside voice inside.
It's got to be part of your game plan.
Yeah.
And again, maybe you're introverted, but you got to learn how to put on a mask, I think, a little bit sometimes. And you got to overcome that. And it's acting maybe a little bit. I think that being prepared builds confidence. Let me find out what to expect. Let me find out somebody who worked for this company before. Let me find out the workflow. If Jack has students that are working on, in studios that he's worked before, you can call and say, what advice do you have? What landmines did you step in that now I can avoid? So you got to be prepared, and that gives you more confidence to, maybe not act so introverted. So it's an act, but if I tell you that if you act that way, you'll be more successful, you got to learn how to put on that mask a little bit, you know what I mean? So that, it's just, it all kind of goes into the whole package of being successful. It's not just not the technical part, there's a lot more to it. So, okay, so let's get onto the Previs part. So my first experience with Previs was on Live Free or Die Hard. I hadn't heard of it before. And so very, very useful for action sequences, where we might have one chance to do something, where we really have to get everybody on the same page. And that's really what it's about. And, it's really about pre-production, and the director has a picture in their head. And when I read a script, maybe when I read it, I have a picture in my head. And Jack reads it, he has a picture in his head. The production designer reads it, the DP reads it. Everybody has a different idea of what that could look like, but none of it matters except what the director sees in their head. And so it's just about making sure that we're all on the same page so that when we are shooting, we're efficient because we have this brief window of time to do it. And so,
It's about money.
yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, guys, it's you'll find that it's all about the cost savings that it brings to the table. Because if you spend enough time on the previs side before you get ready to do your multi-million-dollar shoot, you will save a considerable amount of money instead of having an entire crew there.
And we're figuring it out.
And you're trying to figure it out on the fly. And then you're doing take after take after take instead of in the computer where it's very cheap to have one single artist like myself sitting behind a computer with the director and DP over both shoulders, and we're just spitballing on a computer. There's no actors, there's no electrics, there's no lighters, there's no grips. Nobody's there but just me and these three guys. And you'd be amazed at how much you can figure out right at that moment, because I can put in the same specs for whatever camera you're going to use on set. I can give the director whatever lens he's using on set, I can show him. Because he can look at it, now the 50 doesn't work, throw the 75 on, let's go longer. At that point, it's just more about knowing the terminology and completely faking it till you make it. Because you won't really know how to do that job really well till you're just doing it. There's something to that, you know.
There's, you know, I've seen, you know, even since I was a student here at Full Sail, and it doesn't seem that long ago, but 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It seems like yesterday. I still feel, you know, like a kid that just graduated. But I've seen a real noticeable evolution in the way that we prep. And again, it's all about being as efficient as we can on the shoot day, because we have this resource called time that you can't get more of. The sun goes up, the sun goes down, and we're done. That's it. And I can't like make a phone call. I've tried. I can't like pay somebody money to keep the sun up a little bit longer. You know, that's it. So it's about making sure that we maximize that time. And so, you know, the director, you know, could tell everybody, okay, the actor's walking this way and the other actor comes in here and the camera goes like this. And so this doesn't really mean anything to anybody. You know, again, this is open to interpretation. We're not getting everybody on the same page. It's too abstract, okay? And so, you know, 20 years ago, we were shooting on film. And so it would have been awesome if we could go practice all the shots ahead of time and cut them together and everybody knew what we were doing, but that wasn't possible because film is so expensive to purchase and so expensive to process. So somebody said, hey, you know, I'm pretty good at drawing pictures. And so, you know, the director could describe what the shot was, and we had an artist, like an actual visual artist, who would make a storyboard. And so now we have a still frame that represents what's going on in the shot, and this goes a lot farther to get everybody on the same page. And so, you know, it made a lot of sense. But I can look at a storyboard and it's still kind of open up to interpretation.
Absolutely.
It's hard to see what that looks, to know what that storyboard's gonna look like in relation to the other storyboards when it's actually cut together as a movie. That's hard. Even this far in, I look at storyboards, I'm like, oh, okay. But I still can't really figure out what it looks like.
I've been on shows where they'll cut edits. You know, the whole point of storyboards even is just to start the edit, to get a flow of a film. I've been on movies where it'll be some live action to a storyboard, and then the best to me is there's been a couple I've been on, then it cuts to black with just text, really cool shit. And then it just goes on, you're like, and it's usually like battle sequences, or big armies or something that like are such huge visual effects heavy moments, or that the director, producer, and honestly no one on the set knows what's gonna happen yet. Really cool shit. And you know for that block of time that there's something going to happen there, but just nobody knows yet what's going to happen. I want to segue, though, before you get into the specifics of this, about the three main types of just previs in general. Because the way we look at it nowadays is there's previs, postviz, and techviz. Previs being what Larry's going to get into with the Die Hard stuff, which is clearly the pre-production side of it. Postviz, which can be the same team or maybe a smaller team, their main job is to handle stuff that's coming off set from green screens usually. And they're going to do quick composites for the director, usually live on set. So they're going to be usually around set, or it's going to be quick turnarounds right back to the director. So like if you're shooting Endgame or you're on the latest Alice in Wonderland movie where it's 90% green screen, believe it or not, the directors and them don't always know what is happening behind them. or the postviz artists are setting up for the actors to get an idea of what's happening behind them. And then there's techviz, and that's at the very end. We'll shoot all of this, but then they'll come back and say, look, we want to know the physical specs of where everybody's at. And we have a team who comes in, and we give you down to the millimeter distances between actor A, camera A, how big the stage was, where were the green screens set up when we set that scene up, what gimbal did you use, what's the difference between that and the crane. I mean, we're getting very, very accurate information so that when you guys get on set, everybody's ready to go. I mean, and it should be exactly 1-to-1.
Got measurements on the floor.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we did on Christmas Chronicles on Netflix. I was doing Previs, and then we went on to techviz. And the sleigh for one of the sequences that's flying that Kurt Russell's on was on this huge gimbal. But we built that in 3D first to give them an idea. And the design crew had a very limited stage, but we showed them like how they could make this work. And they took all that information to set so that they were ready to go. So like when we're showing you this first part of Previs, but that team usually will stay through almost to right before we start shooting, and into shooting even.
Die Hard kind of felt like the infancy of this kind of tool. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And yes, now I don't think they had postviz or techviz.
No, and it's changed too. Like we have game design people in here as well. Like it's changed to where even how we work on Previs is started to go this game engine way as well, where we're using Unreal and Unity as kind of our renderers. And I always joke it kind of gives us that Matrix feel, because a lot of the effects and everything are built into the game engine. So it's like, guns. I need more guns. And I click a button and there's just an asset and they all come in. Or like, we need it to rain. Well, that's already built into the game engine. And then it's even better because you can usually, what's cool with directors now is like you can, with game engines, like I'm doing it on the mouse, but at any point I can go like, no, here, dude, take a controller. And the director's like, what? And it's a good and bad thing. Because you give him a little too much control, and like the DP's looking, going, "What are you doing? Get that out of his hand."
You gotta shoot that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's a little precursor.
Yes, and just to finish, kind of like the evolution, because I really want to make sure, especially you film students, you're taking advantage of tools that you have now that we did not have. Yeah. Okay, so storyboards we can't practice shooting this because film is too expensive and this doesn't mean anything. So let me try to get everybody on the same page. And we have a good illustrator that could do this. And so, now I see students and in their classes, maybe part of their requirements of pre-production are to do storyboards, and they do it. And they're like, look, we did it, so I guess we're ready. But it's a really crappy picture, and it doesn't really tell anybody anything. So if you do poorly drawn storyboards, they're useless. You're not ready. That doesn't mean that you're ready because you did check storyboards, but they're crappy and they don't tell anybody anything. So that does not mean that you're ready just because you checked that mark and I did crappy storyboards. And you show them to people and they're like, okay, there's some boxes with some pictures in it, but it doesn't mean anything. So if they're good, then it's a useful tool.
Right.
If you just did it to do it, then it's useless. Okay, so...
And they're cutting themselves short completely.
Right.
You're hurting yourself.
You're not ready. Okay, it doesn't mean that you're ready. And so, finally, we were able to animate the storyboards, and that's what you're going to see now is Previs, and now we can get everybody on the same page. We know that our shots are going to work when they're cut together, and that's really what it's all about. For me, this is proof of concept that your shot list works the way that you think it's going to work.
Absolutely.
And unless you do this, you don't know that for sure, especially if you're a brand new filmmaker. Just because you write shots on a piece of paper, and even if you do storyboards, I ask you, are you really sure that this is going to work when it's cut together the way that you think it does? And just because it's written on a piece of paper, that's very difficult to translate that. And not that many people can do it. Stephen C. Miller can do it. Not that many people.
He's one of the rarities, though.
Because he's an editor that became a director. And so I watch him, and you can see the wheels going. But not that many people could do it. So we're going to get to the animated Previs here, but I do want to point out, and this is still used obviously for visual effects and big special effects shots where there's no other way to get all these elements together to prove that it's going to work. But for you guys that are making, student projects that are narrative, that don't have special effects and visual effects, you should do a live action Previs. The tool that you have that we never ever had before is in your pocket. Everybody has a movie camera in their pocket. I have a lens app called Artemis Pro. Okay, it was $29. There's probably free ones. But now I can, shoot every single shot on my shot list. And it's not about performance. It's not about lighting. It's not about, even being on the regular set. It's just about, hey, I think I want to use a 50 millimeter lens and be over this person's shoulder, and I think it'll cut together with this moving shot. So let me shoot those shots and edit it together and push play. And if it doesn't look like a movie, let me figure out why. Because it's not going to just magically look like a movie when you get the expensive gear out and you have everybody standing around now. If it doesn't look like a movie when you shoot it with your phone, and it's a kind of a douchey term, but cinematic. It should look cinematic.
Right.
And we all know what a movie looks like when we watch it. And so, sometimes I watch live action previs and it looks cinematic. Sometimes I watch it and it looks like a bunch of students running around on the back lot. So what's the difference? I don't know, but you know it when you see it. Okay, so live action previs is where you should be with your pre-production now, if it's a narrative thing without a lot of visual effects and all that stuff.
But understand too, though, previs in general now is being used across the board. It's being used at video game studios for every one of their cinematic sequences as well. You're like, but it's already in 3D. Why would you do? Because the idea of previs as well is to get the concepts out as fast as you can and create these ideas, to get this edit put together so that they have a good idea what's going to happen before they start spending their money, the real money, right? And then it's also using commercials really heavy. I've done a lot of previs for commercials because with commercials, and I'm sure Larry can attest, like they maybe have a 1 or 2 day shoot period. And when you have a 1 or 2 day shoot, especially if you're using like a Westcam and a helicopter, you need to know what's going to happen. I also want to add really fast too, on the previs side, from how we start as artists behind the box, it will either be a case of you get lucky and you actually get handed storyboards, but like Larry said, sometimes you'll get good ones, sometimes you won't. And the majority of those, all I'm really starting from is kind of hoping how the action plays out and framing. Because ideally the directors may be bought off on the storyboards, how things are framed. Worst case scenario, you're handed the script. And on National Treasure 2, that's what it was. It was this third act, 300 pages here, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with that?
And go.
What you do? And I was like, what? And you start to break down how that works. And it literally, for us, it's pretty much everything till you hit the period shot. Everything till you hit a period shot. And that could be one line, and one page could be however many shots in a sequence, and you start doing this, you're like, oh my God, how many shots are in here? But that's kind of how it breaks down. And it's very intimidating because it is literally at that point, till the director sees it, it is 100% left up to your interpretation of how that script reads, which to me is effing awesome because you're at that point, you are the director. And then what's really cool is when the director walks up and sees what you did and is like, that's awesome. Because then you see it in the movie and you're like, that's
you kind of thought of that.
Yeah. I picked the lens. I picked where they were going to stand.
No one's ever going to say thank you.
No, they won't thank you, but it's awesome. Yeah.
Cool. So, just one last thought, and then I'll push play. You guys see some cool stuff. But, as a filmmaker, through pre-production, you just got to ask yourself, am I as prepared as I could possibly be?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that I could do to be more prepared? Okay, I did storyboards. Okay, great. But could you have done a live action previs? Could you get a computer animator and do a computer previs, an animated previs, to make sure that all your shots are going to work? You should be desperate to be as prepared as you can on your shoot day, so that just leaves you time to get better performances out of the actors. And that's really forget all this stuff. If the acting is bad, then all the stuff that we do is like invisible, and nobody cares because it's a shitty movie. Are we allowed to curse in these things?
I was about to say, fuck yeah.
No, he wouldn't say that. All right, cool. So
do.
here, I'm going to show you guys the first time that I ever experienced previs here on Die Hard. Can you put it back down there? So this is the elevator sequence that we shot Universal Studios on one of the sound stages. And you can see, they make the animated Bruce bald.
I also want you guys to notice the slate, the digital slate. And as the shot numbers change, I want you guys to look at the focal length changes. And that's really, really important.
Ha, there's one of your favorite cards.
Yeah.
Cool stuff happens.
Cool stuff happens.
And it didn't go so good for her, I guess. And so for these stunt and visual effects heavy sequences, you will watch this and it is frame for frame exactly the way that we shoot it. We have this previs on set and we're showing the crew the previs. They say, what shot is next? I pull out my phone or my laptop and I say, this one. So that I'm not saying, well, he comes in the elevator and he goes like this and he does that. Or even looking at a storyboard. I'm gonna pull out my phone and say, this shot. And that erases any ambiguity, any question. So it's just really about, getting people on the same page in that way.
Think about, too, when you guys saw that stuff, how many questions could just come out of that previs? Like, oh my God, how the hell are we gonna get a car in an elevator? That should have been your first question that came up, because when I saw it, that's all I thought about. Okay, clearly no building's going to give us the rights to do that, so how do we build this? How do we make this? So it's funny, because you get to this point where you're working with production designers, art team, you're working with all these people once this previs goes to set, because now it's, okay, now we have to make this happen. This looks great.
You get like technical drawings of the set and all that, and measurements of the set that they're building.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we'll put in whatever 3D software we're using at the time, we'll actually put. We'll try to get as much information from the director and his team on where he's shooting. Is this going to be on stage? Are you thinking this is going to be on stage? What stage? And then we try to get the measurements starting from the stage. And then for maybe something like that where we realize we're probably going to need to build an elevator shaft, because the director's like, look, I really want them in a car. I don't want to do digital humans. I really want Bruce's stunt double and his daughter in the car, because it's really going to sell it. Okay, how do we do that? Well, and that we can help them a little bit and be like, look, you could put the car on a gimbal at the bottom that we don't see, but you're still going to need to build this elevator. Well, what car? This car. Okay.
It was an SUV. It was a big car.
Even worse. So then, literally for me, I go further than that. Okay, it's a Ford Explorer. I'm online, going to Ford's site and hoping I can find specs on Ford. And then I kind of from there start to box in an elevator. With that box, I can give that to the production designer and the director and the visual effects supervisor and go, look, that box needs to be built like this, but I can also place it on the soundstage. And the other thing with that is how high it goes. Because they might find there's not a lot of clearance, and then it's another problem. Well, where the hell do we put the camera? Is the ceiling high enough? Do we have to shoot this outside? And those are all these questions are coming from one dude to two guys to girls sitting behind a computer working with the director and the DP to start this process. And to me, that's just invaluable. Because can you guys imagine if you're just in a room and you maybe had a couple storyboards of what that sequence looked like, and you're trying to figure out, like, how much time and money would be spent on set or in just the build out? Like, how would you, how was that handled previous to this?
Storyboards, I guess, and just a lot of testing in pre-production and, trying to figure stuff out, and then inefficient figuring stuff out on the
Bring in the truck. And you just start building around it, correct? Yeah. But the other thing is, too, is, like I said, the digital slate information. Because like Larry said, when you're on set, you pull out the phone, especially Larry's job could be in charge of that, pulling out the laptop, and it's all right there.
Focal length, if you guys noticed, and you'll see more previous on the bottom, it says the lens. That's the lens we're using. That's what's going to go on the camera.
And that's usually coming from the DP. And the DP usually will work with the previs team. It's usually the director and the VP, and maybe the director's visual effects supervisor will all work with us. So this is the other cool thing for anybody in here who wanted to get into previs. We actually get to work with the director.
So you're a previs artist on a film. Where are you working out of? In the production office, or do you have an office at your
I've done both. So for something like Deadpool 2, I actually went to the Fox lot. and we had a bungalow, one of the small bungalows that's there, which is super cool. It was built in like the 20s. And we're there because that's where the director's visual effects supervisor for Fox was at as well. And the whole team, and his editor was there. Same with the second Alice in Wonderland. We were on the Burbank Studios lot, working directly with the director and editor, so that any given moment, as they were cutting this edit together, they'd run in our room, insert shot. What do you guys got? Okay, really fast, Jack, throw this up really fast, throw the dragon, have them running away like this, frame it. Cool. Render it out, give it to me really fast. They cut it into the edit that fast. Other times, though, like the Christmas Chronicles and the Sky High stuff, I was working in a visual effects studio, and we would do stuff, send an edit out, get notes and feedback that come in. They might come visit us once or twice.
So, like, how much time do you usually like actually spend with the director, like over your shoulder?
Some are like intense. So I was on Valerian in the City of a Thousand Planets, and Luc Besson is like all about in your face, like, and it's freaking Luc Besson, man. You know, Fifth Element, Lucy, all these professional, and he's like, he wants to sit and he wants to see what you're doing. Same with Mike Mitchell on Sky High. Talk about uncomfortable. My first gig, and it's me and my lead. Mike would pull his chair up and just sit between us and just sketch. I'm like, well, what's he doing? Like, and I'm nervous as an artist trying to do my job, and the director's like sitting here. But then there's other people like Tim Burton. I got a chance to meet, but just did like one studio walkthrough. I was like, oh yeah, you guys got this.
So you're just getting notes, and then you're sending it off, and then you're getting notes, and
yeah, it's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of back, and usually we're not doing that until we have an edit of something, and it's usually sequences. You have an idea of an action sequence, and what's crazy is usually we're doing internally the edit first of what we think it is before it goes to the director's edit. That becomes much more to the director's edit once you get to the postviz stage, and or you're doing insert shots like the Deadpool stuff where I was there just to cover animation for insert shots that the director might be like, you know, it'd be really cool is if Colossus ran up Juggernaut's arm and did a Statue of Liberty UFC move. That may or may not have happened.
that would be cool.
And it was cool. It didn't get in the movie. Those kind of moments happen, and that's kind of what I was there for. But I also knew, like, at the beginning, these might not make it. And that's the other thing with Previs. You need to decide sometimes your idea doesn't fly.
Oh, yeah. Have you ever had to have that conversation with the director where you're just like, oh, so, you know, just to getting back to what we were talking about before, as far as our job is not to say no to the director.
At all.
Our job is not to say, you know, that's ridiculous, or that's the most stupidest idea I've ever heard, or that's impossible, or I just worked on this for the last 12 hours and you're asking me to change everything. You know, our job is to kind of say, let me try. You know, and so when the director approaches me with something that I know is completely impossible and stupid and ridiculous, I put on my mask and I say, yes, ma'am, great idea. And, you know, but then when I come back, I'm solution oriented. Hey, I really tried to make it fit, but it just didn't. So here's a couple other options of things that I think might work.
Yeah, like on Force Awakens.
What's that, like an independent film or something?
It's a small little project. I always forget the front end of that movie. Force was
Never heard of it.
Something with stars. I forget the name of it. My supervisor when I started there, usually when you work on shots like whatever you're doing, it's like you do whatever kind of the general note is coming from top down to do your shot. His whole take is that JJ was open, and this was really cool. JJ Abrams was open to like different interpretations of the shot depending on who the artist was on the shot. So every shot I would turn over, I would typically turn over 4 at a time. And that was my soups thing. I'm like, how many? He's like, just give me like 4 or 5. 4 or 5. And it was because sometimes they don't know. Sometimes the director isn't like Stephen Miller. And that happens a lot.
So you're doing 5 times the work knowing that they're not going to pick most of them.
Maybe 1.
Yeah.
Maybe they learn from year 5. That is not the direction they want to go, period. And that's always, honestly, that can be a tough pill to swallow for any of us.
There's some part of you that wants to get butthurt about, wow, I did all this work and it's really good and you're not even looking at it.
Sure, yeah, and that's the thing. Like for me, I always joked when I was there, like I would do one that I thought was really close to probably what JJ wanted, because I was doing 5 or 4 or whatever. I would do one that I thought was bad, or it was like rad or whatever, and I would do the Jack version, and then I would do like 3 fillers. with small variations. And I always joke, like, there's a moment in Force Awakens, like, it was a small moment, but it's where Poe and Finn, it's that first moment they see each other, and it was in the trailer. They're at the Rebel base, and they give each other the nod as they walk by, and the camera kind of follows and comes back, and a X-Wing kind of flies off in the distance. Super small. But when they first gave it to me, I was like, all right, cool, and I did one like that, but then I did this Top Gun style. When they come by, I had 2 X-Wings come fly over their head and like zoop off and do this thing. I was like, this is so badass. And I'm at my desk getting super excited like a little kid. I walked into my soup's office. I'm like, huh? I showed him that one first because I was like, he won't even want to see the others after he sees this gem. And he was like, yeah, I see what you're doing there. That won't get approved next. And like he goes on. And those moments happen, but those are ones that I learned to, you roll with. You roll with part of the process, yeah.
Yeah, I think, you can't fall in love with your plan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
at all.
we gotta be nimble. We're gonna change it, and that's it. We're moving forward. We're changing. But, don't even waste the energy or the vibrations of your vocal cords of saying, but that's not what you said before. No, that's like the worst thing to say on set.
Don't do that, yeah.
Hey, here's the plan. But that's not what you said before. Yeah, no shit, that's not what I said before. But this is the plan now. So get on board because this is what we're doing. And you just wasted my time by saying, that's not what you said before.
And animation's even crazier. Like at animation studios, and Jeremy Vickery in the back, who's at Pixar, can definitely attest. The blessing and the curse of animation work is that you're not shooting film. You're not shooting on a location somewhere. You're not shooting with actors per se. So they can change their damn mind anytime they want because they could just reframe something and be like, animator, reanimate.
Reanimator, that's a good movie.
Yeah, it happens all. I mean, there's some dialogue that they might have to go get from the actor wherever he's at, but that's not a problem to them. So you really can never be married to what you're doing in animation. I used to be like, well, no, I love live action because at least if they go out and shoot plates and they give them to me, and plates being just whatever they shot that day, they're pretty locked. That has changed significantly nowadays because they'll just go, no, just do it in CG, we'll change it. And I'm like, But it used to be, if they shot that and they messed up, well, you knew you were locked into that plate. Whereas animation, you're not locked into anything, man.
Plates is a concept that even my film grads really need to grasp. Okay, so we're
and 3D guys.
We're gonna shoot this actor on a green screen, right? What goes on the green screen? We got to shoot that too separately. It's a separate element, and so that gives us crew members 100% more of a chance of getting a job because sometimes there's a plate unit. Okay, so here's Sam Jackson, and he's driving his Shaftmobile, and he's supposed to be in Harlem in New York, and he's supposed to make a left onto the bridge, but we're shooting in Atlanta, and he's on a stage in a car on a green screen. We got there are plates that you can buy online that are like pre-packaged, or we're gonna send a camera out there, and we're gonna shoot what would be behind him on that green screen. So. We talk a lot in film production about green screen, but don't forget, we got to put something on that green screen.
Yeah.
And so those are the plates that go back there.
Yeah. What do you think? Should we open it up to them? You want to see if they have any questions?
Anybody have any questions? I will tell you guys that just getting back to Die Hard, I remembered that the stage that they did build the elevator shaft, and they had the SUV hanging, suspended by a cable. There's this one stage at Universal Studios in LA. The theme park and the movie studio are really like next to each other. So you do the backlot tour and you're actually driving
the backlot
of real films that are being shot. But there's the one stage that is just next to an entrance. And so if you work there on the crew and it's your lunchtime, you could sneak into the park and stuff. But the one stage is right next to the Jurassic Park ride. And so all day, dun, 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 like, oh my God, it's so funny. You'll know it when you're on that stage. It's like an endless loop.
I hadn't even thought about that, but that's.
You know that one? Have you ever worked on that stage?
Yeah, no, I've been over there, but I haven't had to work on that stage. No.
Cool. Question.
Oh, hey. I was wondering, you mentioned doing some research on like the specs for the vehicle, and particularly with like Alice in Wonderland and the Chocolate Factory. Like, did you go back and check out the original source material for that? Do you have any decision making, or is it really just like you said, the director and the DP are calling the shots? Or?
No, I think we did. Like, the interesting thing about Charlie and Chocolate Factory is like we were in charge of that intro sequence. So how many people have seen that, the new one with Johnny Depp? So that whole intro where the camera's doing the fly through the factory, that was given to us. That was our piece at the studio. And as a kid, that's one of my favorite movies of all time, the original. But yeah, we went back, we watched a little bit of that, but Tim certainly had an idea. And he also had a titles guy, which at the time, I didn't even know what that meant. But a kind of a director of title, producer of titles, whose main job is to make all those really rad titles that we see now in front of movies. That's kind of his shtick. And this guy had worked with Tim since like Batman and before that, and his credit list was ridiculous. But they had this idea, you know. Our part was to do all the final animation and the lighting and everything else, but it was also that initial stuff was to get the spec out. Like one of the things I started on was they knew they were going to build the city or the town that takes place in as a miniature. And I was like, what? But they didn't know the camera move, and with miniatures, you're hooked up to a MoCo camera, a motion control camera, that runs through there. And I must have did 35 passes of ways just to fly over the city, come up the smokestack, to get into the smokestack, to transition to chocolate, that then led into the rest of the things that happened. But even part of that process, we were able to pitch ideas. This guy, Matt Hackett, is one of my mentors, was the lead animator. He was a huge Burton fan. And the robots that sit and come down and do the wrapping and come back up and do the wrapping, he designed that. He just we're sitting next to each other. He started sketching out an idea. Modeler gave him some rough models on what. He sat and built a little rig for it really fast and just did one test animation that got sent to show Tim. And Tim's like, perfect. Because it had that Edward Scissorhands feel meets Charlie and Chocolate Factory. And if you guys watch it, you'll see what I mean. They come down and they do all this mechanical stuff. That all just came from us. You know, we were pitching ideas because if you watch that sequence, I don't think there was one single person who completely knew what that was going to look like because it's kind of out there. There's a lot happening. And then Alice, that's a whole nother bag of thing because so much was shot on green screen. I mean, a ridiculous amount was shot on green screen. So for the most part, they really didn't know what they wanted to see until we really were showing it, which is a good and bad thing. The editors were consistently like, you got to throw something back there. I don't know, to get the edit going. So we honestly, for a while, we were only working with the editor. The editor was the one coming in and out asking for, hey, can we get this? That didn't work. Can you maybe do this? Which was kind of new for me. I hadn't really done that before. The director was a little more hands-off and kind of let the editor roll with that. And also, too, the studios control that a bit, too. Disney was like, no, we're bringing this editor in. He's going to start handling stuff. So. And
different directors do lean on their DP more or their editor more. Yep. You know, different directors have different strengths, and they surround themselves with crew members that can sometimes, supplement, areas of weakness. And so I have seen editors take over on movies where the director, leans on them, and that's not a sign of a weakness.
Oh, it's not a slight to the director.
It's recognizing this is why I surrounded myself with these people so that I can lean on them. So interesting that you point that out. Do you have skills as like a traditional artist? Like could you sit down and draw a picture?
Not a good picture.
Do you have to have that for where you ended up?
No. I did as a kid, and I kind of got away from that. And my background, it turned into being like acting, entertainment, and then I got into puppetry. Those skills has transitioned over really well, especially the acting stuff has transitioned over because as animators, especially like at full feature animated houses, we are the actor. Sure, it's somebody else's voice, but that's us acting. We don't, when Will Smith or Tom Hanks is giving us dialogue in the booth, he's not walking around as Woody. He's standing there, his facial expressions are there, but that's an animator sitting out, figuring out, well, this is what he's going to do, So I had more of that. So don't let that hinder if you don't have those skills. But that's not to say, too, that I don't still sketch quick things out if I don't know what it's going to look like, just to show a director. Like, here's what I was thinking really fast. But I've also worked with animators, especially now at Disney, who have been there now 40 years and had worked on like Little Mermaid and prior, where their first passes they still do in 2D and show it as like, what do you think of this, before they put it into 3D. And their 2D pass is just as amazing as like a 3D pass, yeah.
Hey, Jeremy, you got skills as a traditional animator? Are you like an artistic artist?
Oh, he's the artist.
Yeah, I do lots of drawing.
Yeah.
You do a lot of-
He can draw, he can paint. And Jeremy does lighting, like he's a lighter, and all of that comes together with his skill set a little bit more. And I think if I was doing what he does, I would probably spend a lot more time painting and drawing, just because how integral that all ties together.
I could say one thing. I don't know if you need a mic for online people.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, great.
Get this man a microphone.
All right, here's the mic. One of the things that I think about Previs, there's a lot of students, you said something at the beginning of the talk, think, what, there, I can draw storyboards, I'm done. But when you really think about all of the skills that are needed to be able to storyboard, you have to understand 2D composition, you have to understand posing, you have to understand cameras, you have to understand editing, you have to understand flow of story, and those are all skills that take a huge amount of time. And so most storyboard artists that I know have at least 10, 15 years experience before doing it, because it incorporates so many different pieces. So that's something that I've observed. I don't know if
very
you guys
true.
have similar feelings.
Yeah, again, so don't think, hey, I did a storyboard, and so I must be ready. If it's crappy, it's useless. You check the box, and even if your class projects, they tell you got to do storyboards as part of your pre-production. Okay, great, do it and get a good grade. But again, you got to ask yourself, is there anything that we could do to be more prepared to make this film? Is this storyboard really doing the job that it's supposed to?
And also, guys, don't be afraid to ask for help in that. I am all about, I'm one of those guys who's completely being fine being the dumbest in the room, when in retrospect, actually I'm the smartest, because I hired everyone around me to be smarter than me. Little life lesson there, kids.
You're only as good as the people that you hire.
That's exactly it. So things like storyboards, like we were talking about, like I can't sketch very good, but if Jeremy's next to me and I know he can really fast, I'm going to turn to Jeremy. Is this something you can help me with? Look, I have this idea. Can you help me, create that? That's actually, as Previs artists, that's kind of our job. We're there to create that vision. I think maybe one more question?
Do we have one more?
This question is like for both of you. What would you say is the most important quality about a director, or like with you working with a director? What do you want from a director?
For me, it's just to be decisive. You know what I mean? And so you gotta recognize if the wardrobe person comes over to you and says, "Should it be the red shirt or should it be the blue shirt?" Just freaking pick one. It doesn't matter. Okay, this decision does not affect one more person going to see the movie. So just be decisive about it and recognize the things that are important and the things that are just need to be decided on, and be decisive. And early on, you got to recognize that, if you tell me, 3 months ahead, hey, we're going to build a sink on the sound stage, and in the scene, the actress is washing the dishes. If you tell me 3 months before that you want to see water coming through that sink, because it's fake, right? It's not plumbed. It's like this fake thing in the middle of a sound stage. It's not supposed to have water going through it. If you tell me a couple months ahead, great. That's fine. We'll get it all worked out. And I'll ask, hey, do you want to see water? And honestly, I don't care if the answer is yes or no. I'm not trying to like Jedi mind trick you to say no, because if we have to make water come out of it, it's going to be hard. We don't not do things because it's going to be hard. But you got to recognize as a director, if we're there on the day and we never talked about water coming through that, and now all the actors are there and we're standing there ready to shoot, and you're the director and say, where's the water? And we never talked about it, and now we got to try to figure that out. You just boned yourself. Out of hours of time you could have spent with the actors. Now that we got to try to figure out how to make water come out of this sink.
Personally, I guess probably the directors I like best. I mean, I like decisive directors because you just have a path and they know it and you follow it and you get your work done and everybody's happy. For me personally, I love directors who are open to collaborate with their team, who are really, really open to listening. Like Stephen Miller is great with that, like listening to knowing, I think, up front that maybe my idea isn't the best, and being open to other people on the team maybe going, it'd be pretty cool. Like, what do you think if we did this? And them going, you know what, yeah. Actually, Peter Ramsey, who just won the Oscar for Spider-Verse, was my director on Rise of the Guardians when I was at DreamWorks. One of the best directors I've ever worked with, because he was open to that. And I remember going to him after one of our daily sessions. We'd showed this stuff, and it just bothered me how one of these shots we had was done. And I envisioned it in a different way. And he's one of those guys I was able to go up and talk to him, like, I know we're doing it like this, but it really feels like this is the moment that we could do this. And he was like, what was cool with him is we didn't go that way, but he would be like, no, I completely see what you're saying, because that would look super cool, but this is what I'm thinking and why and how it's leading to the next thing. And then I took back, I was like, you know what, that makes complete sense. Not a lot of directors do that. So when you have those directors, guys, milk it without making it creepy, but milk the moment, because you won't always get that.
I go over Previs I can show anyway, since we were supposed to talk about that anyway. From X-Men First Class.
Oh, that's cool.
Can you put it? Oh, there we go. So this one, they had already shot part of this beach sequence, obviously. They didn't like it, and so we were going to reshoot it, and so obviously we got some 100% animated frames and shots here, and then some kind of mixture of stuff that was shot that they were going to use. And again, down there you see focal lengths and lens choices, lenses on the top, and frame for frame, if you watch this, it's exactly the way that it looks in the final film.
Well, thank you everyone for coming out today. Thank you very much to Jack Geckler and Larry Katz for teaching for us. We do have another program scheduled, so you guys will make your way out the door.